We are live, my sisters.
We certainly are.
All right.
Yay. I wonder if we have any viewers.
I don't know, but let's just do it.
Okay, Marianne, so you're going to open us up?
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. It's really always an honor to be in the same space with you and Angela. And I'm really excited for us to do a deep dive into Daughters of the Dust. As you both know, this film was released in 1991. Actually, the first film released in a mainstream movie theater by a Black woman, written, produced, and directed by Julie Dash. And I don't believe that this film has ever all the sweet blessings that it deserves. And so I'm really glad to see a resurgence. I know it's to a whole new audience and folks are loving it. So let's do a deep dive into this film. And let's just talk generally about our overall impressions of Daughters of the Dust. Um, Angela, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Angela Denise Davis. I'm the creative director for Zami Nobla. And I have loved this film for decades. So 1991, that's 3 decades. It has been always on the top of my list. And largely because I think it's one of those films that when someone comes to it who is unaware of African American history, they see it as this quaint little uh, mythic kind of tale. And I remember some reviewers, one reviewer early on had the audacity to say it's just an extended Laura Ashley commercial. And if you know anything about the Laura Ashley Company, they specialize in these high-end, beautiful linen and high life kind of a neo-Victorian kind of sensibility. And it was really an affront because what it says is that that critic and other people who come to the film are unaware of the history of Black folks in the Georgia Sea Island area and our culture, and how we had something that was so unique and so life-giving and life-affirming that when put on the screen for this first time in 1991, so many people were unaware of that rich history and herstory. So I love that Dash was able to provide a real opportunity for people to look at African American culture and the ways in which we thrive through ritual and religion and an aesthetic that was truly ours and ours alone. And we've lost some of that. I think that in the film, as you think about the idea of coming home and leaving home, it's an opportunity for us to look at the ways in which so much of the things that were life affirming and allowed us to thrive, we have left. So there's just so much about this film that I love, and I'll just start there and leave it there for now.
Thank you, Angela. Stahimili Map.
Yes.
Like to introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Stahimili Paulette Map. And, I was thinking 1991, this film was released, as you both have said, 30-year-old film. Does it hold up? And so once I viewed it again and a couple of times again, I think I have the DVD. I have the DVD, so it wasn't like I was ever without my Daughters of the Dust. It does hold up. It still is beautiful. It still is vibrant. It's still relatable. The issues are still with us of migration and immigration, etc. The culture is still there. I practice a lot of the culture that she's talking about in this film. But I think the most important thing to me is that it is still such a beautiful rendering of Black women. and our interests and our concerns, and where we fit within the family, where the family fits within the larger society, and then where we fit as Black people in the diaspora. Julie covers all of that so well. And I was just thinking back on, seeing this film for the first time in the movie theater on a large screen, and just completely pulled in and mesmerized by the images and the beauty of the film, the coloring. If we often complain as Black people and in film over the years, how poorly lit we were in many of those films, and how rich our tones are to our skin. And it's never ever portrayed. I had never seen anything like that. That scene, the opening scene, where they're coming down, they're about to approach Evo landing in the little, little boat that they're riding in, and those three women are sitting there. And then later, when they're sitting in a tree, and you just see the gorgeous skin tones and colors and textures of the film. That blew me away to such an extent that I had to see the film multiple times because I was missing so much, being so mesmerized and so into the lives of these women. And, so I'll kind of leave it there, except to say that we decided to, having this film and this chat and talk back came out of a discussion that we were having in the book club that I facilitate the talk about Audre Lorde's book. We were talking about that, and we're doing that chapter by chapter, so it's a real deep dive. And somehow we got on the topic of Daughters of the Dust. And we were like, we all need to see that film and talk about it. It's about time, and we need to have a nice conversation among us and see how we feel about it 30 years out. So I'm glad that this opportunity came about, and we thank everyone involved who brought it to us, were able to bring us together.
Thank you for that mention, Stahimili. And so I was remiss not to have introduced myself. My name is Marianne Adams, and I am the founder and ED of Zami Nobla, the National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging. As Stahimili mentioned, this talkback is being sponsored by the Zami Nobla Book Club in partnership with Allo and Femme. As some of you know, we worked with them for our first African-American Lesbian Film Festival honoring Audre Lorde. And I'm so happy we were able to do that. And we're continuing this partnership with Craig and Jim and Allo and Femme. So thank them both and Allo and Femme for allowing us to have this platform today. One of the things that I wanted to really have you all speak a bit about was that the first line that we hear uttered in the film is by Nana, who is the matriarch, and she says, "I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the barren one, and many are my daughters. I am the silence that you cannot understand. I am the utterance of my name." So she really describes how she's many things, how she has a number of different identities, and some of those appear to contradict one another. And so I think that, we are certainly led to see right off the bat that this is not going to be a linear film. It's going to go back and forth. There's going to be magic. There's going to be wonder. And I couldn't help but think about intersectionality. We've certainly been discussing that a lot, not only in the book club, talking about the essay Sister Outsider, but also in this country writ large. And it's certainly been introduced to a younger audience, new generations, and we certainly see all of that played out in Daughters of the Dust. We see their intersection between age and race and class, and wanting to go into the new, and really tugging people back into the old, and people scorning that. I mean, all of that. So could you both talk a bit about Nana's role as a matriarch on the Gullah Islands, as the Gullah people in South Carolina, and what that means for you, just as a Black lesbian? And we have to talk about Yellow Mary, certainly, and that whole relationship, because it was a bit murky to me. It was a bit, it left you wondering. So can we first talk about Nana and her role as a matriarch, and her teachings, and just what that meant in the context of this film?
Okay.
Angela, you can go.
I was gonna ask Stahimili if she wanted to go. So for me, I think that whole opening scene in that declaration is her understanding of her ancestry, but also her understanding of the future, and the future that was coming with the next child that was going to be born in that space, and her welcoming that child into that space, regardless of what the origins of her coming was. And so I look at that in the Nana character, this grand matriarch, as someone who understood life and how to look forward, at the same time encouraging the family that was present there to remember the past. And the scene that I think most exemplifies that and stands out for me with her power to literally tie that ancestry, was when she took the hair and tied it around the Bible and offered it as a token for those folks to kiss it, as a way of saying, we have a past, we have a present, but we also have a future. And that very act was threatening to someone, to some in that place. And I think it reminds me of how now even those like Nana and that matriarch who understands the importance of looking back forward while being very present, it's a very threatening person who understands that. And so for me, I've always loved this character. I've always loved her clarity about the past and the possibilities of the future, and her admonition that you also have to be very centered in the present to understand and embrace all of that. So she's probably my favorite character in the whole movie.
Interesting. Yeah. I think
Thank
that
Stahimili.
Nana, to me, Nana Pazant, well, first of all, that she called her Nana, and I called my grandmother Nana. So I was just like right there, Nana Pazant. To me, she's the quintessential Geechee woman. She is the beginning. She is the alpha and the omega, as far as I'm concerned. She has everything there. She holds the culture. She holds the lineage. She holds the future and the past. She's magical. She knows magic. She's embodies spirituality from both the Christian perspective as well as the probably more indigenous or African perspectives. The way that she positions herself and seats herself in the middle of the forest was very meaningful for me. That gave me that feeling of the Ifa ritual sites within the forest in Western East Africa, where where you walk into the forest and you see you see where people have placed all of their symbols, and you see the large altars, and then you see the houses of worship, and then you see where they throw the stones. All of that to me was like right there in Nana Pazant as she sat on her woven throne in the middle of the forest, and all of the people have to come. she is the matriarch, but to me, she's beyond the sense of the matriarch that we have in Western culture. She, to me, is a much larger figure than the matriarch as we talk about in the Western culture. And so I saw her sitting in that forest, like she wasn't sitting inside of a house. She wasn't really sitting on the beach. She's positioned within the forest. And I was like, this is so meaningful to me. And she was meaningful because she clearly is going to be left alone. And she's not, she's not admonishing them for leaving her. She's just saying, when you go, remember who you are and from whence you came. And take that with you when you go, and don't forget me. And I love that she understood that about her children, and she wasn't admonishing them for wanting to live in the present and to see all of these things that they've only seen in books, the order, the catalogs, and they didn't, they hadn't been exposed to that. They had this life that was almost a maroon sort of society there. So yeah, Nana Pizant she was amazing, and I loved her from the very beginning. It's like she was my Nana.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk a bit about Christianity and how it is centered in this beautiful film. We know that we've certainly read and learned that all kinds of religions and Christianity and spirituality practices were certainly central to the lives of Africans, and that Christianity was a religion that was introduced to them. We know that in the scene, we see Viola teaching the young Black children Christianity. And we know that she said, when I left this island, I was a sinner and I didn't even know it. But I left this island touched over to the mainland and fell into the arms of the Lord. Angela, I know that you are a minister, an ordained minister with a Master of Divinity degree. And I'm wondering how that played out for you. And could you explain what came up for you when you were watching that scene and how this is sort of thread throughout the movie? And there's this tension there, certainly. At least I felt it as a heathen looking at this film.
Well, I think that what Viola represents is that future that Nana Pizant is very much aware that the children will embrace once they leave. And so that whole act of kissing the Bible with the hair and that way of being fully embodied, with this text, this Bible, and Viola thinks, of course, it's just sacrilegious. For me, her character represents so much of what we understand that happened to Africans and African Americans in this country. You came knowing who you were and having the understanding of who you were, being told that was wrong, and then finding some way of making sense of being present and getting some humanity via the use of the quote unquote master's religion. And I think that when we see certainly how Africans in this country, those early generations were able to mask their own religious sensibilities within the context of Christianity is quite powerful. And in South America and other parts of the Caribbean, other parts of the world, you see those who were enslaved there did a wonderful job, better than what happened in America, because some of us, quote unquote, drank the Kool-Aid. And generations down, we forgot that this religion was a vehicle that helped so many of us get out of this oppressive space, spiritual space. And we took on that whole history of Viola and seeing ourselves and our culture, our religion as sinful. So for me, that's always just an interesting way of looking at Nana and Viola, an understanding of religion that is uniquely yours, that is embodied within the context of your culture, your physicality, and Viola being in a space where she's told that all of those things about her are sinful, and she drank the Kool-Aid, and so then she comes back to try to help those who are in sin. I think the other thing about the movie that's so wonderful, though, is you see how there are other expressions, not just Christianity, but other ways people in that film express their own spirituality. And so it's a beautiful take on thinking about just the varieties of religious experience, I use that term, that existed within the African and African-American context. We just weren't people who came and embraced Christianity. We had a whole host of things that helped us survive, and we still do. I think the sad part is that even now, so many of us believe that Black and Christian are one and the same, and the varieties of religious experiences that we have in this country are not honored. So for me, when I think about this film, I just think about the way in which Western Christianity has been imposed upon Black bodies, mm-hmm. Black sensibilities, Black ways of being spiritual in this country, and how so many of us have become that Viola character, as opposed to those who understood this is the Bible. I'm wrapping myself around it. I'm going to still be embodied, and I'm going to use it as a way of going forward, as opposed to letting it make me seem like I'm sinful or I'm less than who I am. So that's why I always come back to that scene where you see Viola and Nana at that crossroad, and having to really think about when you take on a religion that tells you you're sinful, but all the things that you've done have helped you to survive. You have to really question that religion.
Very good point.
Yes,
Can
yes.
I speak to that a little bit, Marianne?
Oh, absolutely. I was about to ask you to do so.
Because I always want to give so much credit to Julie Dash for how she deals with spirituality in this film. And actually, the opening scene is of someone sitting at the water's edge, probably with the Quran, and doing the evening prayer. And I remember at first watching that film saying, what the heck is that all about? Like, a Muslim in this? I didn't understand the context of that. Learned later, of course, and if you really think about it, many of us center Islam as a more recent occurrence in African American culture and experience in the States through the Black Muslim movement, et cetera, of the 60s. But actually, the people that were coming from the continent that were enslaved came from many parts of the continent, and many of them brought, as Angela said, their indigenous religions with them, and one of those was Islam. So it was, I thought, an interesting homage in a sense that Julie Dash chose to open the film with that actual piece. And so spirituality runs through all of this film in terms of established religions, Christianity, Islam, and then African cosmologies, various ones we see represented in certain of the rituals. And certainly, as I said, the things we see in the forest. And then also, the child who is co-narrating this is the narrator of this film. And so it's her spirit that we're watching trying to be born. Very, very rich out of Western Eastern African cosmology. Our understanding, certainly as Daughters of the Dust said, Sweet Honey in the Rock said, our children are not ours, they're of us, they come through us. And we really get that sense of this child is going to come through her mother, but she is a person. She has her sensibility, and she's observing her people from right there alongside of them, not in heaven, not, in somebody's mind, right there. And that is definitely an African cosmology. So I thought that was the way she has them all represented. And to me, not one of them took precedent over the other, or it was just a very considerate way of addressing African Americans and our spiritualities, how we are spiritual.
Absolutely. There are a couple of other themes that I'd like to get to before we close, understanding that our time is very limited. And one, I want to talk about um, secrets, secrets and the lineage of Black people. I've been doing a lot of deep diving into ancestry DNA, into looking back, trying to find out where my folks were uh, captured from in West Africa, and finding hundreds and hundreds of cousins and hearing these stories that my ancestors literally took to their graves. And I know they did that because they wanted to keep us safe, and they wanted us to survive, and they wanted us to be still standing, knowing that we were never meant to survive, as Audre Lorde said. However, in knowing that and holding that, there are a lot of gaps uh, in our knowing, in our knowledge, and our understanding. And I go back to what Eula said when Eli was trying to find out who the white man was who raped his wife. And Eula said, nothing good can come from knowing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really underscored throughout this film. So that's one thing that I want you all to percolate on. And the other thing I want us to talk about is that when Yellow Mary came up from the boat, and Hagar said, I believe it was Hagar who said, what a waste of yellow. Mm-hmm. So I want you all to kind of deconstruct that a bit. We are talking about 1991. We're talking about Julie Dash being the first Black woman to write, produce, and direct a mainstream film to be shown in movie houses across this country. We're talking about the first time, I believe, that we saw the subject of Black lesbianism treated in a film by a Black woman, writ large to audiences, and what those limitations may have been, external and internal. What did that mean exactly? What do you all make of? You know what? As a matter of fact, let's talk about this relationship now. Let's park this first question. And because this is Pride Weekend, we're a National Black Lesbian Organization. We are 3 Black lesbians discussing this film that certainly centers 2 Black lesbian characters. Let's just do a deep dive into that. What were you all feeling? Forget what you're thinking. I know you're intellectuals, but what were you feeling when you saw Yellow Mary and what was her lover's name? Julia? Not Julia. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on her name.
I always blank on her name too.
I'll find it before. But can you all talk a bit about that?
Well, I love that, and I'll just say this quickly, and Stahimili, I'll give it over to you. But I love that, that line, that knowledge, all that yellow wasted on a woman. That whole idea of understanding, quote unquote, the value of light skin and how it was wasted on a woman. And it's an interesting part of the film to me, because I think that, when I remember first seeing the film, I was in my early 20s. And, not fully looking at the full dimension of that. And if you're not really observing, you can lose that. Mm-hmm. You can lose the power of what's being said mm-hmm. there, the intersections of not just same-sex love, but colorism.
Right.
Just within that whole statement there. So to me, it's very interesting, because there is a knowing and a not telling. There is an observation and some opinions about Yellow Mary, and some ways in which I think that she has to travel coming back home in a different way that Viola may have experienced too. But it's that whole idea of coming back home, particularly in this space as a woman with her lover, So it's just a very interesting, I think, part of the film to me.
And let me interject because I do not wish her lover to remain nameless in this discussion. I think that would do her a disservice and us as well. Her name was Truella,
Trula.
Trula.
Yes,
Right,
yes, yes.
right. I don't think I've ever met anyone named Trula. Maybe that's why it doesn't stick with me. But your question was, how did we feel? And I felt seen. I felt captured in a way, not in the way of captured as a slave, but captured, understood, recognized, spoken to in a loving way. And it wasn't, it was just natural. Here these two are arriving at Evo Landing in this shallow little boat, lounging next to each other, comfortable, I just thought it was just a very comfortable rendering of who they were. Now, of course, it's not that simple. Somebody has to say something like, yeah, what were those two doing? What was she doing on the mainland? She was a trouble. She was one of those women, and nobody clearly says what woman she was, what she was doing. But, so the audience is left to, bring to that whatever they bring to it. But there was no overt explanation of, their lifestyle, as they said back in the day, or any of that nonsense. It was just, Julie just gives this to us, floating down the river in this cute, this wonderful little boat that had a lot of significance for me. And then, of course, the photography, again, the way they're shot, so beautifully and so comfortably. I thought that was interesting. I felt like I knew those women, like I knew them. I knew people who they were. They were people that were, this wasn't like crazy fiction to me. These were people that I kind of knew. I understood, Yellow Mary had a presence about her and a way of taking charge of what she needed to do that I recognized that. Truly, I was somewhat disturbed that I didn't, not at the time I saw the film, but as you said, Angela, afterwards, looking back and seeing all these subtleties that were played, that we don't hear her speaking very much. She was a very silent figure. And I never could really get at what that was. I hope that folks that are viewing and will have comments in the chat, maybe someone will want to address that or had some other thoughts on who she was. But she was a very silent figure, and that was a little bit disturbing. Not in like a bad way, it's just like, it just took me off my little happy, comfortless space that I had been in. Like, what did she have to say? Like, I want to see the sequel.
She was mysterious.
Yeah, very mysterious. And I guess, yeah, I don't know, maybe you want to expound on her mystery.
Can I just jump back into that real quickly? Because, I think the reason that I find that very interesting, her coming back and coming back to family and coming back home, is just this idea of, from what you just said, when you go into a family reunion and you're with your partner, you don't know anybody. Oftentimes you're not very talkative. At least certainly that's been my experience. You're the new person. Right. And I think this is so much about family, home, returning and leaving. That you're really looking at these three figures, the nanny figure, the Yellow Mary figure, the Viola, as these archetypes. And the presence of the photographer, because I always wonder, so what about this photographer? What is that photographer there for? What is his role in it? And I think it's really about capturing the gaze.
Yes.
And the way in which people are seen, and the way in which we see other people, and then the way in which we see ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this film gives me just a real sense of looking at some of those larger archetypes and how you can be in the world. When you come home, you can be a sinner, or when you come home, you can be saved.
Saint.
You know,
Right.
and
You
it's
can be
all
a
about
whore.
Yeah,
it's all about your perspective. But the whore was saved. The whore was saved. She was clear about her salvation, but the one who came home as a sinner was not saved, even though she thought she had found the Lord, the hands of the Lord. But that's just my perspective on it. You know, when you come back to a place authentically yourself and whole, and we have the gaze that we can see you in that, and you're not subjected to the gaze of the larger culture about who you are. To me, that's just being free.
You know, when I was growing up as a Black girl child in Mississippi, we often heard stories about Mount Bayou, which was this all Black town in Mississippi. It was very self-sufficient. The Black folks didn't need anybody but themselves. They were the mayor, they were the doctor, they were the cop, they were the Sunday school teacher. And when I was looking at Daughters of the Dust again, I was reminded of Mount Bayou. I was reminded of how these Black folk were self-sufficient. They didn't need anybody but themselves. You know, they hunted, they cleaned, they cooked. And I think about the Yellow Mary, her character, in the context of this self-sufficiency, the fact that she left early on, she was independent. There's some, we're not really clear what she did. We kind of believe that she was a sex worker, but whatever she did, she sent money back home. The money that she sent back home allowed them to thrive and to remain self-sufficient. So I'm wondering if there was less said about her bringing her lover home and being a lesbian, because she actually provided for them, and she was the reason they were able to stay on an island as long as they did economically. So I found that really very, very interesting. And I also thought it was interesting that Yellow Mary opted to stay behind on that island with Nana.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a great surprise that
yes, and that dynamic and did Truella stay with her?
Yeah.
And so, what do you all think about that?
I felt that was, you know, when I first saw the film 30 years ago, as you say, Angela, you know, I was young in spirit and mind at that time. As an older woman now looking back on it, it feels right. That Yellow Mary did what she needed to do in the world, and she kept her family self-sufficient on that island, as people often did. Many people, you know, had that maroon nature, and the isolation allowed them to do that. But she did what she had to do, and it was time for her to rest, you know, and to be there and to enjoy her time with her grandmother. And you know, as a person who had that time, I had that time with my grandmother as well. Brought her to take, you know, when as Black women, when we often fill that role, and that we don't leave our old people, you know, we don't. I mean, if everyone that I know that's had to put an older person in some kind of institution, a nursing home or something, it was with such a broken heart and spirit to have to do that. So we don't do that, you know, and I think that to me was paying homage to that. That yes, these
Angela, you want to speak on that? And we are about at 7:41. So we will take questions from in the chat. Angela, do you want to, or you want to,
No, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, one of the things that just kind of pops up in my spirit, as they say, is this idea of when you are authentically yourself and when you understand what gave you life and what was affirming, when you leave that place and you go into the world and you can come back to it, I would imagine there's a great sense of joy because she didn't come back again like Viola. She came back fully aware of who she was and having a sense of joy about her life. And we don't know what her life entailed off of that island, but it just makes me think of when there is something that is life affirming, life saving, that causes you to thrive. And that's certainly what Nana offered her community and her family there, that I can imagine coming back home to that after going off to the world and seeing the world don't love you as much as your home did.
Right.
And it didn't care for you in that same way. I would imagine there was a sense of joy about coming back to a place where there was something very rich. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, I'm conjecturing, but I just think she came back just in such a different way than Viola.
Yeah.
Because she didn't get caught up in the way in which people looked at her, understood, because she had home in here and that was given to her before she left. So she brought it back with her.
You know, I'm reminded of the tension in the film that was very present on that island. The tension between the educated and the old ways. You know, Hagar really being very, very vocal in her insistence that Nana was, you know, was an old woman and her ways really had no place in where they were going. It had no place in the modern and present time. And we know that plays out today, certainly between generations. We hear it time and time again. And the theme that resonated throughout Daughters of the Dust was I remember and I recall. No, I remember and I recall. And I thought, you know, that's something that I need to write down as a mantra. And I bemoan the fact that what was so beautiful in that film was continuing to teach children the rituals, to continuing to teach them the traditions, continuing to really pour into them and it reinforced that they are the legacy, they're the lineage, that they are proud, beautiful African people. And so I really appreciate Julie Dash for that message, for leaving that message with us. And I really hope to see more work from Julie Dash. I know that after that film came out, she was not able to work in the way that perhaps she thought she would have been able to. And that's really a tragedy and that's a shame. And it's, you know, things are opening up more for Black people because Julie's voice is a dash. Julie's dash is a voice that needs to be ever present. It needs to be sustained. And I hope that as we are continuing to revisit her work, that will certainly provide an opportunity for others to continue to do the same. Thank you both for tonight's panel. Thank you for your insightful remarks. We'll see if there are any questions in the chat or any comments. And if not, then we'll come back for some closing last words from the both of you. Craig says he has quiet people, so we don't see any comments or questions. Thank you, Craig. So Stahimili, some last parting words.
I did want to pick up on your last comment about the fact that Julie Dash is, we haven't seen or heard very much of her work post Daughters of the Dust, and that's one thing I do remember. Her actual commentary, if you look at YouTube, I'm sure the video is there, of a panel that she sat on, not maybe a few years, maybe 3 or 4 years after the film was released, with several male filmmakers and producers. Oh, we have some comments, so I'm gonna make this quick. Um, and they were male, they were all guys. And she said they were, you know, she was the only woman there. She was the only woman I felt that had a serious work. I mean, you know, Hudlin Brothers were on there and a few other folk. And I remember the point where she stood up and said to them, you know, I don't get the distribution. They didn't give me the way I got distributed was by word of mouth. People went to see the movie, then they told other people, and other people went and saw the movie, and that's how it stayed in the movie house, and that's how I got the distribution. And she said to them, not one of you helped me. I get no help. You guys have the big contracts. People want to see people, and she didn't say it, but maybe it was intimating. People want to see people. People want to pay you to make the movies with Black folks are shooting each other up and doing, you know. But I don't get that kind of and she didn't. She never got recognized for that, the level and the quality of that work. And I'll say it again, 30 years later, it still stands up. Go back and look at some of those other films that came out in that period. They don't stand up. This film stands up. So therefore, she was right. The quality was excellent. There is absolutely no reason that she is not head of a studio at this point. And she didn't get that support to have her own production company and to do the things that I know she was capable of doing.
Well, you know, Stahimili, you're absolutely right. I'm heartened by the fact that Julie Dash is over at Spelman College, that she is teaching a whole generation of young women to be filmmakers. So her influence will be seen and heard for generations and generations to come. And that certainly, I think,
is heartening, yes.
Yes, it's very heartening. Angela?
Did you say there was a comment?
Yeah, so Joanne DeMarc says, she reflected on silence. Who silences and when the exercise of silence also gives an unspoken power. I viewed her as being powerful through her silence. I guess she's talking about Truella.
Truella.
Yes. So she said she viewed her as being powerful through her silence. As an Italian, I could see the value to talk, teaching, chat in Black culture. So silence lands, not the usual, at least in my culture.
I think my final word would be, I think it's important to, as much as wholly possible in the world, to love yourself fiercely and to show up in the world wherever you are, and to not be subjugated to the gaze, G-A-Z-E, of the larger culture, or that which tells you you are saint or sinner, but to have within your own sensibility an understanding about the power and the way in which you show up in the world and how that is life affirming for your community and for your family. And so I just think that comes out so much in that movie, whether you are at home, leaving home, or returning home. You know, the different ways you can know yourself, but certainly to stand up within yourself so that you can be fully present wherever you are.
Thank you. In closing, Nana said, the older I get, the closer I get to the ground. Let's continue to uplift our ancestors and our land and each other. Ashe.
Ashe.
So thank you all for joining us this evening. And that is the last word.
Period.